Hello and welcome back to Storytime Classics Live, produced by Southwest Shakespeare Company. I am your host, Bo Heckman. Today we are continuing with The Sign of the Four by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. Hope you are enjoying this so far. We have now really reached an interesting point in the story. We have found, basically I'll do a recap here and say that Miss Mary Morstan approaches Sherlock Holmes about her missing father. Through this, we find out that her father served in India, was back, and came back with a great wealth, a great treasure, or at least was well off. He starts, after a couple of years, getting messages from some of the people he knew there, because they all were a part of something. I don't want to give it away. But anyway, after his death, she starts receiving every year a single pearl in the mail. And after someone places an ad for her in the newspaper to respond, as she does, and this is what happens after that. She eventually goes to Sherlock Holmes to figure out what's going on here. He is quite interested with this case, and they are contacted by the son of a man who passed away, who knew Mary Morstan's father. Mary Morstan also becomes, in the future, Miss John Watson, just for all of you out there. So they make it back to the Sholto Manor and find from one of the brothers that the other brother is dead. From various very strange means. It looks to be a poisoned dart that was shot from the ceiling, and not to his neck, but his scalp, which was a mistake I made yesterday by saying, just to make sure I cover that. Anyway, Sherlock Holmes has sent Dr. Watson on a journey to pick up Toby, one of his best assets, a hound that can that has a better sense of smell than and he would trust more than all the police force of Scotland Yard, as he says. So we are also about to meet a team of rascals that Sherlock Holmes employs from time to time, that he made friends with. He has very interesting connections, Sherlock Holmes. So we're about to meet the Baker Street Irregulars. If you are familiar with this, you are probably jumping up and down with joy, because it's sort of a favorite point in the Sherlock Holmes stories. And if you do not know, I'm very much looking forward to this experience of introducing you to the Baker Street Irregulars. So, enough of my incoherent babbling, which I am notorious for, and I will begin the story here. Today we are starting the story at chapter 8. The Baker Street Irregulars. As always, I would like to encourage discussion on the on either YouTube or either one of the Facebook pages that this appears on, and just discuss the story. If it's just something of, I really liked that passage, please write that down. I would love to start comments and discussion on any one of these that I read here. So please feel free to do that. Please stay civilized, though. We don't want it to go bad. All right, let's begin with Chapter 8, The Baker Street Irregulars. What now? I asked. Toby has lost his character for infallibility. He acted according to his lights, said Holmes, giving him down from the barrel and walking him out of the timber yard. If you consider how much creosote is carted about London in one day, it is no great wonder that our trail should have been crossed. It is much used now, especially for the seasoning of wood. Poor Toby is not to blame. We must get on the main scent again, I suppose. Yes, and fortunately we have no distance to go. Evidently, what puzzled the dog at the corner of Knight's Place was that we were two different trails running in opposite directions. We took the wrong one. It only remains to follow the other. There was no difficulty about this. In leading Toby to the place where he had committed his fault, he cast about in a wide circle and finally dashed off in a fresh direction. We must take care that he does not know Now bring us to the place where the creosote barrel came from," I observed. "I had thought of that, but you notice that he keeps on the pavement, whereas the barrel passed down the roadway. No, we are on the true scent now." It tended down towards the riverside, running through Belmont Place and Prince's Street. At the end of Broad Street, it ran right down to the water's edge, where there was a small wooden wharf. Toby led us to the very edge of this, and there stood whining, looking out on the dark current beyond. "We are out of luck," said Holmes. "They have taken to a boat here. Several small punts and skiffs were lying about in the water and on the edge of the wharf. We took Toby round to each in turn, but though he sniffed earnestly, he made no sign." Close to the rude landing stage was a small brick house with a wooden placard slung out through the second window. "Mordecai Smith" was printed across it in large letters, and underneath, "Boats to hire by the hour or day." A second inscription above the door informed us that a steam launch was kept, a statement which was confirmed by a great pile of coke upon the jetty. Sherlock Holmes looked slowly round, and his face assumed an ominous expression. "This looks bad," said he. "These fellows are sharper than I expected. They seem to have covered their tracks. There has, I fear, been preconcerted management here." He was approaching the door of the house when it opened, and a little curly-headed lad of 6 came running out, followed by a stoutish, red-faced woman with a large sponge in her hand. "You come back and be washed, Jack," she shouted. "Come back, you young imp, for if your father comes home and finds you like that, he'll let us hear of it." "Dear little chap," said Holmes strategically. "What a rosy-cheeked young rascal. Now, Jack, is there anything you would like?" The youth pondered for a moment. "I'd like a shilling," said he. "Nothing you would like better?" "I like 2 shilling better," the prodigy answered after some thought. "Here you are, then. Catch. A fine child, Mrs. Smith. Lord bless you, sir, he is that, and forward. He gets most too much for me to manage, especially when my man is away days at a time." "Away, is he?" said Holmes in a disappointed voice. "I am sorry for that, for I wanted to speak to Mr. Smith. He's been away since yesterday morning, sir, and truth to tell, I'm beginning to feel frightened about him. But if it was about a boat, sir, maybe I could serve as well. I wanted to hire his steam launch." "Why, bless you, sir, it is the steam launch that he has gone. That's what puzzles me, for I know there ain't more coals in her than would take her to about Woolwich and back. If he'd been away in the barge, I'd have thought nothing, for many a time a job has taken him as far as Gravesend, and then if there was much doing there he might have stayed over. But what good is a steam launch without coals? He might have bought some at a wharf down the river. He might, sir, but it weren't his way. Many a time I've heard him call out at the prices they charge for a few odd bags. Besides, I don't like that wooden-legged man, with his ugly face and outlandish talk. What did he want always knocking about here for?" "A wooden-legged man?" said Holmes, with a bland surprise. "Yes, sir. A brown, monkey-faced chap that's called more'n once for my old man. It was him that roused him up yesternight, and, what's more, my man knew he was coming, for he had steam up in the launch. I tell you straight, sir, I don't feel easy in my mind about it." "But, my dear Mrs. Smith," said Holmes, shrugging his shoulders, "you are frightening yourself about nothing. How could you possibly tell that it was the wooden-legged man who came in the night? I don't quite understand how you can be so sure." "His voice, sir. I knew his voice, which is kind of thick and foggy. He tapped at the winder. About 3 it would be. 'Show a leg, matey,' says he. 'Time to turn around.' My old man woke up Jim, that's my eldest, and away they went, without so much as a word to me. I could hear the wooden leg clacking on the stones." "And was this wooden-legged man alone?" "Couldn't say. I am sure, sir, I didn't hear no one else. I am sorry, Mrs. Smith, for I wanted a steam launch, and I have heard good reports of the... let me see, what is her name? The Aurora, sir. Ah, she's not that old green launch with the yellow line, very broad in the beam. No, indeed, she's a trim little thing as any on the river. She's been fresh painted, black, with 2 red streaks. Thanks. I hope that you will hear soon from Mr. Smith. I'm going down the river, and if I should see anything of the Aurora, I shall let him know that you are uneasy. A black funnel, you say? No, sir. Black with a white band. Ah, of course. It was the sides which were black. Good morning, Mrs. Smith. There is a boatman here with a wherry, Watson. We shall take it across the river. The main thing with people of that sort, said Holmes, as we sat in the sheets of the wherry, is never to let them think that their information can be of the slightest importance to you. If you do, they will instantly shut up like an oyster. If you listen to them under protest, as it were, you are very likely to get what you want. Of course, now seems pretty clear, said I. What do you do then? What would you do then? I would engage a launch and go down the river on the track of the Aurora. My dear fellow, it would be a colossal task. She may have touched at any wharf on either side of the stream between here and Greenwich. Below the bridge there is a perfect labyrinth of landing places for miles. It would take you days and days to exhaust them, if you should set about it alone. Employ the police, then? No. I shall probably call Anthony Jones in at the last moment. He is not a bad fellow, and I should not like to do anything which would injure him professionally. But I have a fancy for working it out myself, now that we have gone so far. Could we advertise, then, asking for information from wharf fingers? Worse and worse. Our men would know that the chase was hot at their heels, and they would be off out of the country. As it is, they are likely enough to leave, but as long as they think they are perfectly safe, they will be in no hurry. Jones's energy will be of use to us there, for his view of the case is sure to push itself into daily press, and the runaways will think that every one is off on the wrong scent. What are we to do, then? I asked, as we landed near Millbank Penitentiary. Take this hansom, drive home, have some breakfast, and get an hour's sleep. It is quite on the cards that we may be afoot tonight again. Stop at a telegraph office, cabby. We will keep Toby, for he may be of use to us yet. We pulled up at the Great Peter Street post office, and Holmes dispatched his wire. Whom do you think that is to? He asked, as we resumed our journey. I am sure I don't know. You remember the Baker Street division of the detective police force whom I employed in the Jefferson Hope case? Well, said I, laughing, this is just the case where they might be invaluable. If they fail, I have other resources, but I shall try them first. That wire was to my dirty little lieutenant, Wiggins, and I expect that he and his gang will be with us before we have finished our breakfast. It was between 8 and 9 o'clock now, and I was conscious of a strong reaction after the successive excitements of the night. I was limp and weary, befogged in mind and fatigued in body. I had not the professional enthusiasm which carried my companion on, nor could I look at the matter as a mere abstract intellectual problem. As far as the death of Bartholomew Sholto went, I had heard little good of him, and could feel no intense antipathy to his murders. The treasure, however, was a different matter. That, or part of it, belonged rightfully to Miss Morstan. While there was a chance of recovering, it was I who ready to devote my life to the one object. True, if I found it, it would probably put her forever beyond my reach, yet it would be a petty and selfish love which would be influenced by such a thought as that. If Holmes could work to find the criminals, I had a tenfold stronger reason to urge me on to find the treasure. A bath at Baker Street and a complete change freshened me up wonderfully. When I came down to our room, I found the breakfast laid and Holmes pouring out the coffee. Here it is, said he, laughing, and pointing to an open newspaper. The energetic Jones and the ubiquitous reporter have fixed it up between them, but you have had enough of the case. Better have your ham and eggs first." I took the paper from him and read the short notice, which was headed "Mysterious Business at Upper Norwood." "About 12 o'clock last night," said the Standard, "Mr. Bartholomew Sholto of Pondicherry Lodge, Upper Norwood, was found dead in his room under circumstances which point to foul play. As far as we can learn, no actual traces of violence were found upon Mr. Sholto's person, but a valuable collection of Indian gems which the deceased gentleman had inherited from his father has been carried off. The discovery was first made by Mr. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, who had called at the house with Mr. Thaddeus Sholto, brother of the deceased. By a singular piece of good fortune, Mr. Anthony Jones, the well-known member of the detective police force, happened to be at the Norwood police station, and was on the ground within half an hour of the first alarm. His trained and experienced Norwood police station, and was on the ground, his trained and experienced faculties were at once directed towards the detection of the criminals, with the gratifying result that the brother Thaddeus Sholto has already been arrested, together with the housekeeper, Mrs. Burnstone, an Indian butler named Lal Rao, and a porter or gatekeeper named McMurdo. It is quite certain that the thief or thieves were well acquainted with the house, for Mr. Jones's well-known technical knowledge and his powers of minute observation have enabled him to prove conclusively that the miscreants could not have entered by the door or by the window, but must have made their way across the roof of the building, and so through a trap door into a room which communicated with that in which the body was found. This fact, which has been very clearly made out, proves conclusively that it was no mere haphazard burglary. The prompt and energetic action of the officers of the law shows the great advantage of the presence of such occasions, of a single vigorous and masterful mind. We cannot but think that it supplies an argument to those who would wish to see our detectives more decentralized, and so brought into closer and more effective touch with the cases which it is their duty to investigate. "Isn't it gorgeous?" said Holmes, grinning over his coffee cup. "What do you think of it?" "I think that we have had a close shave ourselves of being arrested for the time." "So do I. I wouldn't answer for your safety now if he should happen to have another of his attacks of energy." At this moment there was a loud ring at the bell, and I could hear Mrs. Hudson, our landlady, raising her voice in a wail of expostulation and dismay. "By heaven, Holmes," I said, half rising, "I believe that they are really after us." "No, it's not quite so bad as that. It is the unofficial force, the Baker Street irregulars." As he spoke, there came a swift pattering of naked feet upon the stairs, a clatter of high voices, and in rushed a dozen dirty and ragged little street Arabs. There was some show of discipline among them, despite their tumultuous entry, for they instantly drew up in line and stood facing us with expectant faces. On one of their number, taller and older than the others, stood forward with an air of lounging superiority, which was very funny in such a disreputable little scarecrow. "Got your message, sir," said he, "and brought 'em up on sharp. 3 bob and a tanner for tickets." "Here you are," said Holmes, producing some silver. "In future they can report to you, Wiggins, and you to me. I cannot have the house invaded in this way. However, it is just as well that you should all hear the instructions. I want to find the whereabouts of a steam launch called the Aurora. Owner, Mordecai Smith. Black with two red streaks. Funnel black with a white band. She is down the river somewhere. I want one boy to be at Mordecai Smith's landing stage opposite Millbank to say if the boat comes back. You must divide it out among yourselves and do both banks thoroughly. Let me know the moment you have news. Is all that clear?" "Yes, Governor," said Wiggins. The old scale of pay, and a guinea to the boy who finds the boat. Here's a day in advance. Now, off you go." He handed them a shilling each, and away they buzzed down the stairs, and I saw them a moment later streaming down the street. "If the launch is above water, they will find her," said Holmes as he rose from the table and lit his pipe. "They can go everywhere, see everything, overhear everyone. I expect to hear before evening that they have spotted her. In the meanwhile, we can do nothing but await results. We cannot pick up the broken trail until we find either the Aurora or Mr. Mordecai Smith. Toby could eat these scraps, I dare say. Are you going to bed, Holmes?" "No, I am not tired. I have a curious constitution. I never remember feeling tired by work, though idleness exhausts me completely. I am going to smoke and to think over this queer business to which my fair client has introduced us. If ever man had an easy task, this of ours ought to be. Wooden-legged men are not so common, but the other man must, I should think, be absolutely unique. That other man again! I have no wish to make a mystery of him, to you anyway, but you must have formed your own opinion. Now do consider the data. Diminutive footmarks, toes never fettered by boots, naked feet, stone-headed wooden mace, great agility, small poisoned darts. What do you make of all this?" "A savage," I exclaimed. "Perhaps one of those Indians who were the associates of Jonathan Small." "Hardly that," said he. "When I first saw signs of strange weapons, I was inclined to think so, but the remarkable character of the footmarks caused me to reconsider my views. Some of the inhabitants of the Indian peninsula are small men, but none could have left such marks as that. The Hindu proper has long and thin feet. The sandal-wearing Mohammedan has the great toe well separated from the others, because the thong is commonly passed between these little darts, too, could only be shot in one way. They are from a blowpipe. Now then, where are we to find our savage?" "South American, I hazard?" He stretched his hand up and took down a bulky volume from the shelf. "This is the first volume of a gazetteer, which is now being published. It may be looked upon as the very latest authority. What have we here? Andaman Islands, situated 340 miles to the north of Sumatra, in the Bay of Bengal. What's this? Moist climate, coral reefs, sharks, Port Blair, convict barracks, Rutland Island, cottonwoods. Here we are. The Aborigines of the Andaman Islands may perhaps claim the distinction of being the smallest race upon this earth, though some anthropologists prefer the Bushmen of Africa, the Digger Indians of America, and the Terra del Fuegans. The average height is rather below our feet, although many full-grown adults may be found who are very much smaller than this. They are a fierce, morose, and intractable people, though capable of forming most devoted friendships when their confidence has once been gained. Mark that, Watson. Now then, listen to this. They are naturally hideous, having large, misshapen heads, small, fierce eyes, and distorted features. Their feet and hands, however, are remarkably small. So intractable, and fierce are they that all the efforts of the British official have failed to win them over in any degree. They have always been a terror to shipwrecked crews, braining the survivors with their stone-headed clubs or shooting them with their poisoned arrows. These massacres are invariably concluded by a cannibal feast. Nice, amiable people, Watson. If this fellow had been left to his own unaided devices, this affair might have taken an even more ghastly turn. I fancy that, even as it is, Jonathan Small would have given a good deal not to have employed him. But how came he to have so singular a companion? That is more than I can tell. Since, however, we had already determined that Small had come from the Andamans, it is not so very wonderful that this islander should be with him. No doubt we shall know all about it in time. Look here, Watson. You look regularly done. Lie down there on the sofa and see if I can put you to sleep." He took up his violin from the corner, and as I stretched myself out, he began to play some low, dreamy, melodious air. His own, no doubt, for he had a remarkable gift for improvisation. I have a vague remembrance of his gaunt limbs, his earnest face, and the rise and fall of his bow. Then I seemed to be floated peacefully away upon a soft sea of sound, until I found myself in dreamland, with the sweet face of Mary Morstan looking down upon me. Chapter 9. A Break in the Chain. It was late in the afternoon before I woke, strengthened and refreshed. Sherlock Holmes still sat exactly as I had left him, save that he had laid aside his violin and was deep in a book. He looked across at me. As I stirred, I noticed that his face was dark and troubled. "You have slept soundly," he said. "I feared that our talk would wake you. "I heard nothing," I answered. "Have you had fresh news, then?" "Unfortunately, no. I confess that I am surprised and disappointed. I expected something definite by this time. Wiggins has just been up to report. He says that no trace can be found of the launch. It is a provoking check, for every hour is of importance." "Can I do anything? I am perfectly fresh now and quite ready for another night's outing." "No. We can do nothing. We can only wait. If we go ourselves, the message might come in our absence and delay be caused. You can do what you will, but I must remain on guard." "Then I shall run over to Camberwell and call upon Mrs. Cecil Forrester. She asked me to yesterday." "On Mrs. Cecil Forrester?" asked Holmes, with a twinkle of a smile in his eyes. "Well, of course, Miss Morstan, too. They were anxious to hear what happened." "I would not tell them too much," said Holmes. "Women are never to be entirely trusted, not the best of them." "All right. Good luck. But I say, if you are crossing the river, you may as well return Toby, for I don't think it is at all likely that we shall have any use for him now." I took our mongrel accordingly and left him, together with a half-sovereign, at the old naturalist's in Pinchin Lane. At Camberwell, I found Miss Morstan a little wary after her night's adventures, but very eager to hear the news. Mrs. Forrester, too, was full of curiosity. I told them all what we had done. Suppressing, however, the more dreadful parts of the tragedy. Thus, although I spoke of Mr. Sholto's death, I said nothing of the exact manner and method of it. With all my omissions, however, there was enough to startle and amaze them. "It is a romance," cried Mrs. Forrester. "An injured lady, 500,000 in treasure, a black cannibal, and a wooden-legged ruffian. They take the place of the conventional dragon or wicked earl." "And 2 knight-errants to the rescue," added Miss Morstan, with a bright glance at me. "Why, Mary, your fortune depends upon the issue of this search. I don't think that you are nearly excited enough. Just imagine what it must be to be so rich and to have the world at your feet." It sent a little thrill of joy to my heart to notice that she showed no sign of elation at the prospect. On the contrary, she gave a toss of her proud head, and though the matter were one in which she took small interest. It is for Mr. Thaddeus Sholto that I am anxious," she said. "Nothing else is of any consequence. But I think that he has behaved most kindly and honorably throughout. It is our duty to clear him of this dreadful and unfounded charge." It was evening before I left Camberwell, and quite dark by the time I reached home. My companion's book and pipe lay by his chair, but he had disappeared. I looked about in the hope of seeing a note, but there was none. "I suppose that Mr. Sherlock Holmes has gone out," I said to Mrs. Hudson, as she came up to lower the blinds. "No, sir. He has gone to his room, sir. Do you know, sir," sinking her voice in an impressive whisper, "I am afraid for his health. Why so, Mrs. Hudson?
Well, he's that strange, sir. After you was gone, he walked up and down, until I was weary of the sound of his footstep. Then I heard him talking to himself and muttering, and every time the bell rang out, he came on to the stairhead with, "What is that, Mrs. Hudson?" And now he has slammed off to his room. But I can hear him walking away the same as ever. I hope he's not going to be ill, sir. I ventured to say something to him about cooling medicine, but he turned on me, sir, with such a look that I don't know how ever I got out of the room.
I don't think that you have any cause to be uneasy, Mrs. Hudson, I answered. I have seen him like this before. He has some small matter upon his mind which makes him restless. I tried to speak lightly to our worthy landlady, but I was myself somewhat uneasy when through the long night I still from time to time heard the dull sound of his tread, and knew how his keen spirit was chafing against this involuntary action. At breakfast time he looked worn and haggard, with a little fleck of feverish colour upon either cheek. "No, I could not sleep," he answered. "This infernal problem is consuming me. It is too much to be balked by so petty an obstacle, when all else had been overcome. I know the men, the launch, everything, and yet I can get no news. I have set other agencies at work, and used every means at my disposal. The whole river has been searched on either side, but there is no news, nor has Mrs. Smith heard of her husband. I shall come to the conclusion soon that they have scuttled the craft, but there are objections to that. Or that Mrs. Smith has put us on a wrong scent. No, I think that may be dismissed. I had inquiries made, and there is a launch of that description. Could it have gone up the river? I have considered that possibility too. There is a search party who will work up as far as Richmond. If no news comes today, I shall start off myself tomorrow, and go for the men rather than the boat. But surely we shall hear something." We did not, however. Not a word came to us either from Wiggins or from the other agencies. There were articles in most of the papers upon the Norwood tragedy. They all appeared to be rather hostile to the unfortunate Thaddeus Sholto. No fresh details were to be found, however, in any of them, save that an inquest was to be held upon the following day. I walked over to Camberwell in the evening to report our ill success to the ladies, and on my return I found Holmes dejected and somewhat morose. He would hardly reply to my questions, and busied himself all evening in an abstruse chemical analysis which involved much heating of retorts and distilling of vapours, ending at last in a smell which fairly drove me out of the apartment. Up to the small hours of the morning I could hear the clinking of his test tubes, which told me that he was still engaged in his malodorous experiment. In the early dawn, I woke with a start, and was surprised to find him standing by my bedside, clad in a rude sailor dress with a pea-jacket and a coarse red scarf around his neck. "I am off down river, Watson," said he. "I have been turning it over in my mind, and I can see only one way out of it. It is worth trying, at all events." "Surely I can come with you then," said I. "No. You can be much more useful if you will remain here as my representative. I am loath to go, for it is quite on the cards that some message may come during the day. Through Wiggins, though Wiggins was despondent about it last night. I want you to open all notes and telegrams, and to act on your own judgment if any news should come." "Can I rely on you?" "Most certainly." "I am afraid that you will not be able to wire to me, for I can hardly tell you yet where I may find myself. If I am in luck, however, I may not be gone so very long. I shall have news of some sort or other before I get back." I had heard nothing of him by breakfast time. On opening the Standard, however, I found that there was a fresh allusion to the business. With reference to the Upper Norwood tragedy, it remarked, "We have reason to believe that the matter promises to be even more complex and mysterious than was originally supposed. Fresh evidence has shown that it is quite impossible that Mr. Thaddeus Sholto could have been in any way connected in the matter." He added
He and the housekeeper, Mrs. Bernstone, were both released yesterday evening. It is believed, however, that the police have a clue as to the real culprits, and that it is being prosecuted by Mr. Anthony Jones of Scotland Yard, with all his well-known energy and sagacity. Further arrests have been expected at any moment. That is satisfactory so far as it goes, thought I. Friend Sholto is safe, at any rate. I wonder what the fresh clue may be, though it seems to be a stereotyped from whenever the police have made a blunder. I tossed the paper down upon the table, but at the moment my eye caught an advertisement in the agony column. It ran in this way: lost, whereas Mordecai Smith, boatman, and his son, Jim, left Smith's Wharf at or about 3 o'clock last Tuesday morning in the steam launch Aurora, black with 2 red stripes, funnel black with a white band, and the sum of £5 will be paid to anyone who can give information to Mrs. Smith at Smith's Wharf, or at 221B Baker Street, as to the whereabouts of the said Mordecai Smith and the launch Aurora. This was clearly Holmes' doing. The Baker Street address was enough to prove that. It struck me as rather ingenious, because it might be read by the fugitives without their seeing it in more than the natural anxiety of a wife for her missing husband. It was a long day. Every time that a knock came to the door or a sharp step passed in the street, I imagined that it was either Holmes returning or an answer to his advertisement. I tried to read, but my thoughts would wander off to our strange quest and to the ill-assorted and villainous pair whom we were pursuing. Could there be, I wondered, some radical flaw in my companion's reasoning? Might he be suffering from some huge self-deception? Was it not possible that his nimble and speculative mind had built up this wild theory upon faulty premises? I had never known him to be wrong, and yet the keenest reasoner may occasionally be deceived. He was likely, I thought, to fall into error through the over-refinement of his logic, his preference for a subtle and bizarre explanation when a plainer and more commonplace one lay readily to his hand. Yet, on the other hand, I had myself seen the evidence, and I had heard the reasons for his deductions. When I looked back on the long chain of curious circumstances, many of them, trivial explanations, were incorrect. The true theory must be equally ultra and startling. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, there was a loud peal at the bell, an authoritative voice in the hall, and, to my surprise, no less a person than Mr. Anthony Jones, who was shown up to me. Very different was he, however, from the brusque and masterful professor of common sense who had taken over the case so confidently at Upper Norwood. His expression was downcast, and his bearing meek and even apologetic. "Good day, sir, good day," said he. "Mr. Sherlock Holmes is out, I understand." "Yes, and I cannot be sure when he'll be back, but perhaps you would care to wait. Take that chair and try one of these cigars." "Thank you. I don't mind if I do," said he, mopping his face with a red bandana handkerchief. "And a whiskey and soda?" "Well, half a glass. It is very hot for the time of year, and I have had a good deal to worry and try me. You know my theory about this Norwood case. I remember that you expressed one. Well, I have been obliged to reconsider it. I had my net drawn tightly around Mr. Sholto, sir, when pop! He went through a hole in the middle of it. He was able to prove an alibi which could not be shaken. From the time that he left his brother's room, he was never out of sight of some one or another, so it could not be he who climbed over roofs and through trapdoors. It's a very dark case, and my professional credit is at stake. I should be very glad of a little assistance." "We all need help sometimes," said I. "Your friend, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, is a wonderful man, sir," said he, in a husky and confidential voice. "He's a man who is not to be beat. I have known that young man go into a good many cases, but I never saw the case yet that he could not throw a light upon. He is irregular in his methods, and a little quick perhaps in jumping at theories, but on the whole, I think he would have made a most promising officer, and I don't care who knows it. I have had a wire from him this morning, by which I understand that he has got some clue into this Sholto business. Here is the message." He took the telegram out of his pocket, and he handed it to me. It was dated from Poplar at 12 o'clock. "Go to Baker Street at once," said he. It said, "If I have not returned, wait for me. I am close on the track of the Sholto gang. You can come with us tonight if you want to be at the finish." "This sounds well. He has evidently picked up the scent again," said I. "Ah, then he has been at fault too," exclaimed Jones with evident satisfaction. "Even the best of us are thrown off sometimes. Of course, this may prove to be a false alarm, but it is my duty as an officer of the law to allow no chance to slip. But there is someone at the door. Perhaps this is he?" A heavy step was heard ascending the stair, with a great wheezing and rattling as from a man who was sorely put to it for breath. Once or twice he stopped, as though the climb were too much for him, but at last he made his way to our door and entered. His appearance corresponded to the sounds which we had heard. He was an aged man, clad in seafaring garb, with an old pea-jacket buttoned up to his throat. His back was bowed, his knees were shaky, and his breathing was painfully asthmatic. As he leaned upon a thick oaken cudgel, his shoulders heaved in the effort to draw the air into his lungs. He had a coloured scarf round his chin, and I could see little of his face save for a pair of keen dark eyes, overhung by bushy white brows, and long grey side whiskers. Altogether, he gave me the impression of a respectable master mariner who had fallen into years and poverty. "What is it, my man?" I asked. He looked about him in the slow, methodical fashion of old age. Is Mr. Sherlock Holmes here?" said he. "No, but I am acting for him. You can tell me any message you have for him." "It was to him himself I was to tell it," said he. "But I tell you that I am acting for him. Was it about Mordecai Smith's boat?" "Yes. I knows well where it is, and I knows where the men he is after are, and I knows where the treasure is. I knows all about it." "Then tell me, and I shall let him know." "It was to him I was to tell it," he repeated, with the petulant obstinacy of a very old man. "Well, you must wait for him." No, I ain't going to lose a whole day to please no one. If Mr. Holmes ain't here, then Mr. Holmes must find it all out for himself. I don't care about the look of either of you, and I won't tell a word." He shuffled towards the door, but Anthony Jones got in front of him. "Wait a bit, my friend," said he. "You have important information, and you must not walk off. We shall keep you whether you like it or not until our friend arrives." The old man made a little run towards the door, but as Anthony Jones put his broad back up against it, he recognized the uselessness of resistance. "Pretty sort of treatment, this," he cried, stamping his stick. "I come here to see a gentleman, and you two, who I never saw in my life, seize me and treat me in this fashion." "You will be none the worse," said I. "We shall recompense you for the loss of your time. Sit over here on the sofa, and you will not have long to wait." He came across, sullenly enough, and seated himself with his face resting on his hands. Jones and I resumed our cigars and our talk. Suddenly, however, Holmes's voice broke in upon us. "I think that you might offer me a cigar too," he said. We both started in our chairs. There was Holmes, sitting close to us with an air of quiet amusement. "Holmes!" I exclaimed. "You here? But where is the old man?" "Here is the old man," said he, holding out a heap of white hair. "Here he is, wig, whiskers, eyebrows, and all. I thought my disguise was pretty good, but I hardly expected that it would stand that test." "Ah, you rogue!" cried Jones, highly delighted. "You would have made an actor, and a rare one. You had the proper workhouse cough, and those weak legs of yours are worth £10 a week. I thought I knew the glint of your eye, though. You couldn't get away from us so easily, you see. I have been working in that get-up all day," said he, lighting his cigar. "You see, a good many of the criminal classes begin to know me, especially since our friend here took to publishing some of my cases. So I can only go on the warpath under some simple disguise like this. You got my wire? Yes. That was what brought me here. How has your case prospered?" "It has all come to nothing. I have had to release 2 of my prisoners, and there is no evidence against the other 2. "Never mind. We shall give you 2 others in place of them. But you must put yourself under my orders. You are welcome to all the official credit, but you must act on the line that I point out. Is that agreed?" "Entirely, if you will help me, then." "Well, then, in the first place, I shall want a fast police boat, a steam launch, to be at the Westminster Stairs at 7 o'clock. "That is easily arranged. There is always one about there, but I can step across the road and telephone to make sure. Then I shall want 2 staunch men in case of resistance. There will be 2 or 3 in the boat. What else? When we secure the men, we shall get the treasure. I think that it would be a pleasure to my friend here to take the box round to the young lady to whom half of it rightfully belongs. Let her be the first to open it. Watson?" "It would be a great pleasure to me." "Rather an irregular proceeding," said Jones, shaking his head. "However, the whole thing is irregular, and I suppose we must wink at it. The treasure must afterwards be handed over to the authorities until after the official investigation." "Certainly. That is easily managed. One other point. I should much like to have a few details about this matter from the lips of Jonathan Small himself. You know I like to work the detail of my cases out. There is no objection to my having an unofficial interview with him, either here in my rooms or elsewhere, as long as he is efficiently guarded." "Well, you are master of the situation. I have had no proof yet of the existence of this Jonathan Small. However, if you can catch him, I don't see how I can refuse you an interview with him." "That is understood, then." "Perfectly. Is there anything else?" "Only that I insist upon your dining with us. It will be ready in half an hour. I have oysters and a brace of grouse, with something a little choice in white wines. Watson, you have never yet recognized my merits as a housekeeper." And we will stop here today and begin with Chapter 10, The End of the Islander. I hope you're enjoying this reading of The Sign of the Four by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and the Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. If you have any questions or would like to start a discussion, please write on the Facebook pages that you're seeing this, or the YouTube channel that you're seeing this. Please write comments, lovely ones indeed. Keep them clean, please. I shouldn't need to say that, but I would love discussions or just or thoughts that you had about how the story is going, and speculation if you have any. I would like to encourage that. Have a wonderful rest of your day today. If you are going outside, please be safe and please wear a mask. We'll catch you next time on Storytime Classics Live.